Welcome to part 3 of turning your images into paintings. As I promised, I didn't make you watch for the hours that I spent going in and blending all the fabric and everything together and finishing up the hair to give us our final painted look. What I did do is I did make a copy so that you can see the areas where I went in and I drew in the fabric folds, the shadows, next to a highlight, and turn that off. When blended all together, they look like this. So if I turn that on and off, you can see that I went in and I did a pretty extensive job of reshaping that fabric. That's why when I photographed the original fabric, I wasn't that concerned about having it all perfect. I knew that I was going to reshape it to be a little more in exactly the shape and form and flow of lines that I wanted it to be. So there wasn't much reason for me to spend, an hour pinning it down and taping it, and I do this so I can allow my model to move around more freely, knowing that I'll be able to fix it later. If you notice, I do have stronger lines in the areas where there is a fold and a different fabric coming out completely so that it's tucked around and everything. Alright, so now to finish this painting up, what we're going to do is we're going to start to add a little texture overlays to give it the final look and everything. So over here I opened up some textures already, and if you don't have a folder full of textures, start collecting them. I've taken pictures of things, I've found things online. There are a lot of resources online for buying or even having free textures. A lot of people like to share them. So this is one right here. This is a stone texture. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to drop it in here. I'm going to Control T to bring up my transform window, and if I right click inside there, I'm going to get my transform option. So I'm going to go ahead and rotate that 90 degrees. Grab a corner and I'm going to pull it out so that it goes outside of the area that I'm going to be working on. Now I'm going to go ahead and set my blend mode to soft light. And the reason I'm going to set it to soft light is because soft light ignores 50% gray, and as it gets brighter it makes it lighter. As it gets darker it makes darker. And it gives us the little texture here, kind of the stone texture, but we don't want a stone texture per se. What we want is, we want it to look more like a brush stroke. So we're going to come up here to motion blur. And I like to put my first stroke layer in the direction that the light is flowing. So we lit from the right. So I'm going to angle it going from the right. Now what you can do is you can come in here, we can bring this up a little bit bigger, play around with the distance. If you go too much, it just looks blotchy. If you don't go enough, it looks splotchy. So if you go just right, and you can dial it in and play around with it, you get the little brush stroke look to it. And this is kind of what we're going for here. So when we get it, we're at 68 pixels, angle of -41 looks pretty good to me. So we're going to go ahead and say OK. Now don't do that. I pushed the wrong button. There we go. OK. Right next to the Control key, which I wanted to push. Now if you see, we've got the brush strokes, and it did add a little bit of that color into there. It's a neutral color. I'm not overly concerned about it right now because it kind of adds a little bit of the warmth, the aging, the yellowing that you see with a painting. So we're going to come over here. We're going to grab another stone. Let's see, do I like that one? I like that. I like this bottom one here better. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and put it over there. Zoom out. Hit Control T, right click so that I can get my options, rotate it, pull it up here. Again, make it bigger. The reason I'm making it bigger is when I do the motion blur, I want it to have area to pull in so it's not up to the edge and trying to pull in nothing. So I'm getting a good stroke line around that. We'll go ahead and close these up. So again, we're going to set our blend mode to soft light. Now this one, since it has a bluish color, I don't want the bluish color, so I'm going to go ahead and desaturate. So Shift Control U will desaturate. We can look it up here, see, desaturated. And we're going to go and we're going to do a motion blur, but we're going to go in the opposite direction. And again, we'll go up bigger and we can take a look at that, and this might be a different distance. Again, try it. See what number works best for the, I got a little bit lower here, for the visual effect that you're going for. We're going to take this opacity down just a little bit. Now because this is a different layer, we can go to a curve. And as I said, it ignores the 50% gray. Well, 50% gray is over here. So if we come over here, we can adjust the contrast and give it a little different look here. So now we got where we got kind of the brush strokes coming in there. Now there can be a little bit that we don't want. See, if I turn it on and off, I can see some areas like right in here that I don't want that particular look. And over here in the hair. So I can just come over to my healing brush, make it a little bigger, and the areas that I don't want to see it in as much, I can come in and just clean it up a little bit here. On the hair there, I didn't like it. Right across the face, right there, I didn't like it. Let's see, come down here. Not seeing anywhere that I'm finding it objectionable. There's one right there, but that's going in the opposite direction, so it's going to be on the other layer, so we'll just go ahead and get that. One on the eyebrow I don't like. There we go. Okay, so now what we have is we've got pretty nice texture. You can leave it right here. It looks very nice. Sometimes you want to go a little bit more. So you can come in, we can grab this one. This is a painted texture. It's got the little painting daubs around there, makes it a little brighter in the middle. So we can go ahead and put that in there. Control T. Bring that up, boom. And we can play around with our blending modes. So if you go to certain blending modes, we get different looks. Now if we go to multiply, it's going to make it darker around there. If we go to screen, it's going to go brighter. Hard light, soft light, overlay looks kind of nice. And what I'm looking for, I'm not looking for anything on our subject. I'm looking for this background. It kind of adds quite a bit to the background. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a mask. Go to my brush, make sure I'm on a regular brush, not mixer brush. We're going to come up bigger, so I'm just going to, there we go, hold down the right bracket. We're going to take our opacity up to about 85%, and then I'm going to paint it out where I don't want that effect. With a big brush, come in bigger, then come down with a smaller brush. Clean up around these edges a bit. clean. Clean some more. There we go. Come on over here. Let's clean that up. And then we'll take our opacity down to around 50%-ish. We'll fine tune a little smaller brush around that. And I'm doing this at a lower opacity just so that I can do a few passes and kind of blend that into the background so it gets a little bit of it around there, but we're not getting a hard line. Remember, no hard lines in paintings. So getting a little bit softer along those edges give you a little bit more nicer look. There we go. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back for a final one at 100 and clean up the face completely. That way we get a little smoother transition, but we get the sharpness on the face that we're going to want. Alright? Now the last two layers that I'm going to work on are going to be our dodge and burn and our coloring. Alright, so what we're going to do is we're going to make a new layer here. So Shift Control N makes a new layer, and I'm going to call it DB for dodge burn. And I'm going to set my blend mode to soft light. What this is going to allow me to do when I go back to my brush is going to allow me, let's move this down a little bit so we can see our numbers up here. I'm going to take my opacity down to around 15%. And what this is going to let me do is this is going to let me to add shadows, add highlights in, so that we can start to fine tune our look. So if I come in, brush tool, and see I can add in a little bit of shadow here. So I can accentuate the lighting a little bit more. Going with a little smaller brush, we're going to add in some depth. Add in a little bit of shadow where we should have some natural shadow. And I prefer adding my shadows in this way rather than painting them in, because it gives me a little finer control. And by going at a 15% opacity, what it allows me to do is gradually build up my shadows. And that way, multiple passes means I never have the same brush stroke twice. So I'm building in a little bit of feathering naturally. Alright, now we're going to do the same thing with white, so we can add a little bit of highlight into some areas. I'll go in with a smaller brush. Vroom, vroom. And what this allows me to do is add in some shadows. Now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to flatten everything but my dodge burn layer. So if I do that, right click, we can come up to merge layers, merge system. So we can turn them on and off, see them a little bit nicer. Now the next layer I'm going to put on is going to be, I'm going to do that below it. New layer, Shift Control N, we're going to call it color. And we're going to set our blend mode to color. What this will allow me to do, this will allow me to go in and fix a little bit of discoloration in some little areas to make it look a little more like we got a little green spot right there, going a little bluish in the shadow, which is natural. So what we're going to do is, with our brush tool, we're going to select that color. We're going to go to 30% on our opacity. We're going to select a color right next to it. Boom. So that we're using the color that is directly next to it. Complementary. And I'm selecting the color. When I do that, I am holding down the Alt key when I'm in the brush mode, and that gives me the picker tool temporarily, and then I can click on the color I want to select. Okay, so with our color mode, we're going to go, we went in, change all that around. Another thing that we can do if we want to, we can come in here. Come on, work, there we go. And we can pick that cheek there, and we can come in, take the opacity down to 10%. Add a little bit of that color onto the cheeks so that it matches the lipstick. Nice little touch. At that point, now we're pretty much done. So what I'm going to do, we'll turn the dodge burn layer on and off so you can see how I added some shading and some highlight to create a little more depth for a subject. Turning the color on and off, it's a subtle variation, but you can see, look right there in the shoulder how we fix that little blue shadow into be more natural. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead, merge everything except our original here. I'm going to turn that back on. So you can go from there to there. We'll zoom out. So painted, unpainted. Unpainted to painted. And that is how you get a more classical painted look. In future workshops, we will go over how to do like an abstract painting and other styles of paintings. So this is one to get you started, getting the techniques down. So have fun creating some art.